Alrighty, so this video is pretty self-explanatory from the title, but I kind of just wanted to go through what I'll be talking about, just in case maybe you're not interested in some parts, you can skip through if you would like. So I'm going to be spending some time on showing like the cycle of abusive relationships, and I'm going to be then spending some time talking about tactics and maybe signs, like things that you can look out for in someone that tends to be a little bit more manipulative and, just unhealthy. And yeah, I'll also be giving a little background into, why people may become this way, why people may become, unfortunately, like abusive or just kind of toxic partners or just people in general. And in addition to all of that, I just want to give this disclaimer. This is not to make anyone feel bad. This is not to point fingers at anyone. But I think with these kinds of videos, it's important to remember that we should also be checking ourselves to make sure that we're not actually being the manipulative person or being like the toxic person. Yeah, so we'll jump right in. Alrighty, so please bear with me because I am no artist. I am far from it, but I do think that visuals help. I'll add a picture before this section in order to, help maybe clear some things up because this is probably comparable to a 12-year-old's work. Anyways, that being said, this is the cycle of abusive relationships. So number one is going to be when the abuser is, courting you. It's the honeymoon phase. They're very charming, these people, and you never see it coming, actually. It's, I've definitely been in a relationship that was very unhealthy, and I didn't see it coming. This person's so charming. They know exactly what to say and what to do, and they really are very good at gaining your trust. And that trust, unfortunately, equates to vulnerability, because when you trust someone, you do become a little vulnerable, and we're creating that opportunity for them to kind of hurt us, if you look at it cynically. Anyways, number two is going to be a lot of tension because an incident has occurred. So this is when maybe you do something that upsets the abuser, and, in your minds, you acknowledge that you messed up, but in reality, it's actually not something that you need to be exploded on for. In fact, you should never handle it that way, but it's like this incident wasn't that big of a deal and you apologize, but they don't seem to understand that, and they kind of just take all their anger and frustration out on you because people that are abusive and manipulative, they're always very insecure. They're fragile egos, are trying to protect them from feeling the pain, and they kind of want to inflict that pain back onto you, and most of the time it's like 20 times worse than what you did to them. Plus, the intent of what you did is very different from the intent of the abuser. They kind of explode on you to have this tactic of control and power over you. So then that leads to reconciliation, which means that the abuser is going to be apologizing, and they're going to be using those same charming skills that they have to kind of court you back in and to, kind of bring you back closer, because of course when something happens like an incident, it's going to push you away, and it's going to not really make you trust this person as much. But these people are very good at gaining your trust back. So that is phase number three. And during this time, shortly after, it's going to be calm, but there's going to be some tension building. But in addition to that, we're kind of back in the honeymoon and courting phase. So then this cycle repeats over and over again, so you're back in that honeymoon and courting phase, and then it goes to the tension, and then kind of the explosion, and then it comes to the apology. And like I said, these abusers are very good at what they do. So it's very hard sometimes to be aware of what's going on, because when you like someone, you really want to forgive them and you want to trust them, and you don't want to think these bad things about them, or you don't really want to have these conversations with yourself. But it's really important to pay attention to this cycle, and it's good to ask yourself if you're currently in one, maybe if you've ever been in like an abusive cycle. So just a little bit of background on people that tend to be abusive in relationships. So these people are often really insecure, and they have extremely fragile egos, and that's actually why they can't handle a lot of pain. One incident that may seem like something that you can just apologize for and just explain that it was a mistake and that that's something that you can work on, to them it just totally crushes their ego because it's not very strong to begin with. So any amount of pain can really put them in a place that they're scared and they're fearful, and they need to control that. So instead of, working on that themselves, they think, hey, maybe I can control you. That way I'll feel better again. And, a lot of the times these people that become like abusive or toxic people in relationships actually have kind of a sad story. Maybe they were abused or their parents were overly controlling and they just felt like they didn't have a lot of power or control in life, so they choose to try and have that over their partner. Also, I'm not trying to humanize abusive people, but I think in psychology, if I've learned anything, I've learned that it is important to be compassionate, but that doesn't mean that you condone people's behavior. You can still try and understand someone's position and, have some love for them, but that does not mean you have to be involved, and that does not mean that you have to condone their behavior. So, moving on, there's going to be some things that I will be going over. Key terms. Good Lord, my handwriting is terrible. Woo! Anyways, I'm going to be going over 6 tactics, signs, just things that abusive and manipulative people do in order to kind of have control over you. And some key terms that we're going to be looking out for. There is scapegoating, gaslighting, and love bombing. So let's go over this. So someone that is controlling is going to be very charming. So like I talked about in the cycle of, abusive relationships, these people are always really good at what they do. They're very charming and they seem very sweet, and you can't even imagine them being anything else besides that. And a tactic that they use during this phase is love bombing. So this is when they're offering like intense amounts of attention, and they're kind of doing anything that they can for you to have you put them up on a pedestal. That way you can trust them, and they want you to also be reliant on them. They want to make you feel in a way that no one else can. So they're going to be trying as hard as they can to get themselves up on that pedestal and to gain your trust. Alrighty, so number 2 and 3 go hand in hand with each other. So gaslighting and scapegoating really coincide with each other because they're both tactics and they kind of work magically well together. I hate to say that, but I mean, it does. The power of both of them almost create this like synergistic energy to have a lot of control over someone. So scapegoating, actually, let's start with gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you manipulate someone to start questioning their own sanity. So let's just say somebody does something that really hurts your feelings. Like they totally crossed a boundary. Like they know that you're insecure about something, so they go ahead and they try and use that insecurity against you. So an example of this would be, maybe they're embarrassed of their weight, so the abuser basically makes like a really rude remark about your weight, and it makes you feel really bad. And then later you try and bring it up and you're like, I really didn't appreciate that you said that. And this person will be like, what are you talking about? Like, I never said anything like that. And you're just like, yes, you did. But this person is so good at convincing you that they didn't say that in order to protect their self-image that it ends up actually making you question your own sanity. It makes you question yourself. And it's kind of incredible how easy it is actually for us to fall into that, especially with someone that we like. It's scary, to say the least. Now, the second one is scapegoating. So this is when you start blaming others for things that are totally your fault. So what would be an example of this? Scapegoating would look like if your partner did something that made you maybe jealous. And, to you, it's like, no, you clearly did that. Like, let's just say they went out clubbing with a bunch of women and their guy friends, and you try and have this conversation with them about it, and you're like, hey, like, that made me feel a little uncomfortable. Like, maybe why didn't you at least invite me? Sorry, I'm coming up with hypothetical situations here. And when you say that to this person, they'll be like, oh, well, my friends forced me, or, oh, because you did it, that means that I can do it. Basically shifting the blame off of themselves and putting it onto you or anyone else and not taking responsibility for what they did. That is basically the gist of what scapegoating is. Number 4 is guilt tripping. So they will make you feel guilty for anything that they can make you feel guilty for. And like I was talking about scapegoating, kind of putting the blame onto other people, making you feel guilty also just adds on to that. So they're like, you know what? I went to the club because you went to the club like a few months ago, and I'm allowed to basically do this too. And they make you feel as if it's your fault that they chose to do something that hurt you, when in reality, a healthy relationship is like, hey, can we talk about this? Can we come up with a compromise? And maybe we can work on not doing that in the future. This does basically the exact opposite of that. And one bad incident will probably be held over your head, and it will be used as a justification by the person that is, kind of abusive and toxic and manipulating you. So another thing that we will see in people that kind of manipulate and, are toxic to their partners is that they'll always rationalize their behavior. So let's say that, you really wanted them to meet your parents, and, you guys had all these plans, and then the day of, this person, your partner, is nowhere to be found. And, you try calling them, texting them, and they're just not responding, and, it is what it is. And so you try and talk to them after, and you're like, that really hurt my feelings. Like, we had these plans, you made this promise. And their response would be, you know what, let's refer back to that time that you really hurt my feelings. You went to the club and you did all these things, and they'll try and use any incident to rationalize their behavior, even when there's literally no relation between the two things. And yeah, people that tend to be more manipulative and abusive really just like to maintain that power and control over you. So they think that in order to maintain that control, they cannot admit their wrongs, because then they'll lose their power. I mean, in reality, it's not logical thinking, in my opinion, but that's how they tend to view things. So then this kind of leads us into the idea that you end up apologizing for the things that they do. Because they rationalize their behavior, and because, they scapegoat, they gaslight, they do all these things, you end up actually feeling really guilty. And you end up being the one that apologizes. Oftentimes you'll realize, if you're kind of in an abusive relationship, that you're always apologizing, even for things that aren't your fault. You'll try and bring something up that upset your feelings, because God forbid if you did it to the other person, they would probably explode. But you try and bring it up in a way that, you're just trying to communicate and compromise and kind of just come to some kind of a conclusion. And yeah, that leads to you apologizing. That's the only way to really fix the issue, is that you have to be the one that says you're sorry. And they're not even going to meet you halfway. They're not even going to own up for what they did, because you basically did it for them. But in reality, it's they don't even have to say sorry, because you're doing that for them. And let me just remind everyone that it's not your fault. You're not a bad person for taking responsibility. In fact, that's incredible and commendable. But it's not a healthy boundary, and it's something that we need to recognize if we do that. Because I know I've done that a million times, and I oftentimes apologize for way too many things. And, it's just something to really keep in mind. So this one's really important to kind of keep an eye out for as well. So people that tend to be manipulative and, just toxic, they never want to communicate directly. They're always communicating passive aggressively. And what I mean by that is, if something bothers them, they'll kind of try and brush it, under the carpet. They're like, oh yeah, or they'll at least make it seem like they're okay with what happened. But, meanwhile, they're actually talking behind your back, kind of trying to ruin your reputation, and they're almost plotting for what they can do to equalize and seek this revenge. And it makes you feel like you have to also walk on eggshells, because when they do something back to you, so passive aggressive. So let's give an example of what this would look like. So this means that, something happened, you did something that hurt their feelings, and you guys, have a conversation about it. And, you both agree that it hurts your feelings to do this. So it would be fair if both of you guys in the future would work on it. And, it's kind of like a boundary that you're setting. So you have this conversation, and then maybe a couple weeks later, you find out that they did the same thing that you guys spoke about, but times 20. And then you're just like, wait a second, like I thought that, we had this communication that this was not okay. And what this does for them is it protects their image, because they really don't like to look like the bad person and they don't like to take responsibility. But it also makes you insecure and anxious because it's like, oh, I messed up. So like now I don't know what's going to happen. And, it starts making it makes you feel like you just totally messed up the whole relationship because of this one incident, when in reality, every single relationship has their mistakes and they have, incidents that happen that can really hurt the other person. But as long as that's communicated and, there's an agreement and compromise to really work on that in the future, then it's okay. But with these manipulative people, they will hold that over your head for as long as they can. And they will make you feel really bad about it, and they will make you feel anxious, like, oh, you don't know what they're going to do. They become a little bit unpredictable because they say one thing, which is, hey, like, yeah, that's fine, but then their actions are actually doing something else, and they're basically using your insecurity or the thing that hurt you against you in order to gain power and control over you. Whew, it's crazy. So I just want to close this video up with, if you are in a kind of abusive relationship, or, after watching this, you kind of realize that you are being manipulated, just remember that there's nothing wrong with you. Like, this happens to everyone on a day-to-day basis. Advertisements are actually manipulating us by persuading us into believing that maybe their product is the best, or doing this activity is the best, or, if you spend your money on this, then you're going to get like all the women or the men in the world, or whatever it is that you like. You don't have to feel like, you're not as intelligent because you're being manipulated, or that, like I said, that you're not worth a lot, because this happens to everyone on a day-to-day basis. And most of the time, these people that actually end up manipulating, and being abusive, they look for people that are actually really kind and that are forgiving and that are really trusting, and people that kind of wear their heart on their sleeve. And these are all incredibly beautiful and wonderful traits to have. And, with the right person, those things will be taken care of. But unfortunately, people that like to manipulate their partners kind of prey on these characteristics. And I wanted to highlight that because you need to remember that you are worth so much. You should not feel bad about being the person that, is being manipulated, or for being in this, unhealthy relationship. It happens to a lot of us. And the reason that I make videos like this is not to demonize the individuals that are behaving in this manipulative, manner. It's more of to become conscious of this so you can watch out and, create your own boundaries. But it's also really important to be conscious of our own behaviors. A lot of the times we engage in these maybe not so healthy behaviors and we don't even realize it. So when I make videos like this, it is not to point fingers, but it's more of to gain consciousness, create boundaries, and maybe just have these honest conversations with yourself. And also always remembering to check yourself and make sure that you're being this healthy person, because, that is the point of me promoting healthy mental health, is because I want everyone to be healthy. This is not to point fingers and blame anyone else. This is, like I've said probably a million times already, this is to really help you out and just become more conscious. So that being said, thank you for watching my video. If, you guys want links or maybe additional resources to like signs that you can look out for, I actually have a ton, because this is a subject that I spent a lot of time investing myself into, because I was in a pretty toxic and abusive relationship a few years ago, and I know it's really tough, and it's even harder to get out of, because you just become, you become insecure. Your self-esteem really lowers in these situations, and it's really kind of hard to pick yourself back up. So yeah, that being said, thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, everyone.